Hello everybody, Ben Rogers here, the Raptors Digest, reacting to some Toronto Raptors news. Ryker, Shams came out a couple days ago and said that the Orlando Magic are waiving center Khem Birch, Canadian center Khem Birch, and said that the Toronto Raptors are the most likely landing spot. And then you and I didn't want to make a video right away on the situation, as obviously it wasn't confirmed he was officially signed to the Raptors or anything like that. Obviously you can't sign a guy that's still on waivers with his team, but the Raptors broadcast put him up on the screen last night saying he was a guy that's coming in. Still saying it's not official, but when it's put up on the broadcast, I think it's safe to say he's going to be on this team. So, Ryker, what are your thoughts on bringing in Khem Birch, who has been a notorious Raptor killer in the past?
Has he been a Raptors killer? We all know him, especially from Jack Armstrong, just absolutely praising this guy as much as possible every time that the Raptors have faced the Orlando Magic. My initial gut reaction is, uh-oh, are the Raptors trying to win? Because that center spot in the roster is the one reason that you and I believe that the Raptors have been losing close games, right? We said if they tighten up that interior defense, then they're right there. And a center, a legitimate center, might be enough to actually put them into the W column, which everybody, for the most part, wants to tank now. But you look at his stats, and it really is extremely comparable. Minutes played, rebounds, points to Aaron Baines. So maybe we're just swapping for a potentially more talented but equal stat giver in Khem Birch. So that's my gut reaction, Ben. I know you have a lot to break down, though.
Yeah, and that's the big thing whenever we bring anyone in, it's been over the past couple of weeks, or talked about bringing someone in, as will they hurt the tank? Will they stop the Kazoos from being played? Because the Raptors were deep into the season, about 20 games left to go. It's not looking bright for this roster right now. And if Khem Birch does fill those holes at the center position, as you mentioned, he's not going to be a complete game changer. He's not going to be a player that we look at and say, you know, he's going to take us to the next level. He makes us favorites versus the Sixers or something if we make the play-in tournament or something like that. But he could very well be a guy, if he blocks shots, gets rebounds, is a bit more of a finisher down in the lane, he could certainly be a guy that has a positive impact on winning, and that's been a massive hole for the Raptors. So people are always questioning whether it hurts the tank, helps the tank, and I think, as you mentioned, 5 points, 5 rebounds for Baines, the same thing from Birch. Obviously, he's 6'9", so I think he's a bit shorter than Baines, but the athleticism, Jack Armstrong always talks about him being a shot blocker. He'll come in and have a positive impact, but I don't know if it will necessarily change anything in the win-loss column. But the one area that I am excited to see him being brought in for is, yes, he's an unrestricted free agent at the end of this year, and I'm assuming if we pick him up off waivers or we sign him in a free agency market right now, he'll only get a one-year deal with the squad. But to have a test phase, a test trial, and we'll have this with Gillespie now for the next 10 days at least, but to see who could potentially be a backup center next season, Khem Birch, he's 28 years old, a bit older than you and I expected, but you know, when we saw it, we always pictured him as maybe a 23-year-old, 24-year-old, as he hasn't been in the league too long, just 4 years. But to give a little trial run and maybe versus Baines, Boucher potentially, who had a monster game last night, and see who would be the right backup center for this team going forward when we do expect to win next season. I'm excited to see what he can provide for this roster for the rest of the year and see if he's a piece in the long-term future.
Maybe. Ben, let me hit you with a couple of interesting stats. If I don't know if you were just the only person on screen, but if I was on screen while you were talking, my eyeballs were doing scanning. I'm reading up on my Khem Birch facts. One of them. So we have a Mountain West Division Defensive Player of the Year and Malachi Flynn. Well, guess what? We're bringing in another one because when he played at UNLV, he was a 2-time Mountain West Defensive Player of the Year with 2.6 and 3.8 blocks per game, respectively, in those seasons. So that's what I'm excited to see, a potential shot blocker. Now, it didn't really translate into much, obviously, with his time on the Orlando Magic, because with 20 minutes a game, he's putting up only slightly over half a block per game. Now, I'm going to give him a little bit of a benefit of the doubt that you're playing with the Orlando Magic. You're playing with a very difficult team to excel, and so we'll see what happens. Now, you can also make the counter argument that this Raptors team is extraordinarily untalented, or they at least haven't been able to put it together, so he might not be coming to a better situation. But Ben, fact number 2 was another undrafted guy. I'm still going. All right, I thought there was an interruption. Fact number 2 was that he was undrafted. The Raptors love to pick up undrafted guys, swoop them up from the needle in the haystack classic, just like Fred VanVleet, and build them up. So I don't want to put that much pressure onto Khem Birch because he might just be a sign and drop guy or a sign not re-sign guy, just like you mentioned. But again, it's just the fact that he's the type of player that the Raptors development staff love to build up. And then finally, he's had some crazy stories. He worked his way into the NBA by going through G League, by going through international. He played for a team in Turkey, USAC Sportif. And I know that I'm going to get criticism for that, but apparently every day they would wake up in like some sort of ritual chant, which used to freak him out. And apparently he won for Olympiakos, the Greek team, and the celebration in Greece was like to set off bombs, fireworks, everything. So he's had a very interesting, turbulent career, Ben. An exciting guy to bring in, character-wise.
Yeah.
And a Montreal native.
So you brought up a lot of things there, and firstly, I guess one interesting thing is we've seen Malachi Flynn play a lot over the past few games. Kyle Lowry seems to be out for, they said at least 10 games, or 10 days. That might get extended a little bit longer. They don't want to rush Lowry back, especially with his age and the direction the season's going. So Malachi Flynn, maybe that university connection there. Having a big man to play pick and roll with Malachi. We saw it with Chris Boucher in the last game. Malachi Flynn and him, whether it was Siakam or Boucher, getting a little bit of pick and roll action. Not a lot. The Raptors haven't ran a lot of that this season, but it really worked out. Malachi had about 8 assists in the last one. So to have a big roller such as Khem Birch going to the rim, right, that could be an interesting...
Is that our new thing, a big roller, Ben?
A big roller, you know?
Just like that Flint or the fleece roller that Drake sold during the playoff run 2 years ago.
Do you remember that was one of our most used GIFs in the OG GIF loop? The Drake roller would play about 5 times every minute. But
yeah,
throwback to that. But that would be an interesting dynamic because they might be starters right now, Ryker and Malachi Flynn and Khem Birch, seeing what happens with all the injuries, with everything that's been going on. But seeing those two guys, I'd be excited maybe as a potential future bench pick and roll tandem. Both are solid defensive guys. Both have the offensive ability, right? Khem Birch we'll see more about his sort of skills on the offensive end. I think that's a really cool dynamic. You brought up his history, you brought up his past. Again, another guy that's been overlooked in his career. Lots of things, lots of grinded to get to this point. Fits the Raptors narrative the same way Freddie Gillespie has been. But Ryker, I gave my thoughts and opinions on will this help us make the playoffs or will it hurt the tank, depending on what side of things you're on. How do you think this impacts winning? Because I don't know if it's really going to be a game changer, but there is that potential, because that's the biggest hole in the Raptors roster right now.
Yeah, on paper, it will be literally no impact to this team because you are swapping out a guy who gets 18 minutes for a guy who gets 19 minutes, and the stat lines are virtually identical.
Yep.
43% from the field versus 44% from the field. 5.9 points per game versus 5.3 points per game. 5.1 rebounds versus 5.1 rebounds. So he's doing it almost the exact same way that Aaron Baines is, which is a bit discouraging. I think everybody would agree because people's opinions are very low on Aaron Baines. Some of it justified, some of it unjustified. Insurance pylon, right? He didn't come into the best situation, I think, to play up to his strong suits, but obviously he's also had some shortcomings that are undeniable. Yeah. But you look at maybe the off the stat sheet potential that Khem Birch could have. And it's exactly the things that you said. Having a more reliable defensive mindset, being a little bit longer, a little bit more physical. Again, it doesn't show up on paper, but you'd hope he'd have maybe a nicer touch around the rim, that if he gets those offensive rebounds or if he gets the ball, little shovel pass or a dump off by Lowry, VanVleet, or Malachi Flynn down in the lane, that he could at least put it up and bank it off the glass, right? Aaron Baines struggles when has deep position and anybody is around him, it seems, even misses wide open layups. So again, off the stat sheet, if he just is a little bit more fundamentally sound, then the Raptors might start winning a couple games. But do I think that that's going to put them into the play-in tournament? no, I think the tank is still on, Ben. I don't know about you.
Yeah, and I think the perception of this Raptors team's got a little bit skewed by destroying a very undermanned Golden State Warriors team, which really was the worst team in basketball last season, and then a Wizards team without Bradley Beal and in need of a game winner from Gary Trent Jr. And they really looked like they were trying to tank the end of that game, and Siakam did his best efforts by running through a wall and trying to... They were fighting for the tank. They were fighting for the kazoos. I don't even know if I played this animation tonight. The Raptors got blown out, absolutely demolished, destroyed by the Chicago Bulls, who are fighting to get into that play-in, or fighting for a position in that play-in spot, one position ahead of us. The Raptors, they do have some easier games coming up. The Cleveland Cavaliers, who I believe are still below us in the standings. I think we play OKC once again, who their whole team is out, whether it be to actual injury or hypothetical injury, the plantar fasciitis that's been going around that team. But regardless, I think even if the Raptors win a couple games coming up and people get excited, the end of the season, and one thing that really discouraged us when we were coming back, we weren't fully on the tank yet, we weren't playing the kazoos, was we were expecting this Raptors team to bounce back healthy, maybe make a move at the trade deadline. We weren't really sure what was going to happen, but the Raptors had the fourth toughest schedule in the league. I'm not sure where it's at right now, but we've just played a lot of easier teams, and I eyeballed the end of the season for the Toronto Raptors, and there's a lot of Brooklyn Nets in there. There's some LA Lakers, Clippers, Jazz, these sorts of teams, which even if Khem Birch comes in, is fully integrated into the lineup, and is a takeover, is a Serge Ibaka clone or something from last season. Obviously, he's not nearly the level of something like that. But best case scenario, he just is a transformative centerpiece for us. I think it's still a big hole, and we have some tough games coming up regardless. But Ryker, we brought up some dynamics. We brought up different players, different what we want to see. But two Montreal guys in the front court, potentially off the bench. This is an exciting thing for Canada basketball. Maybe a situation where chemistry is there. I don't know. Are we going to have to make a French podcast at some point? I'm learning it. I don't feel
We'll make the French
enough
podcast if we bring in Lou Dort, because then we have our 3 through 5 are all Montreal natives. So that would be the very next step. But Ben, if you can start rhyming off some French, by all means, go for it. The floor is yours.
Je peux parler un petit peu de la français. Je vais apprendre le français sur Boussu. That's that's where I'm learning it. So I'm not at that level yet.
You need a petit ami.
Une copine. Or une whatever's girl, I guess.
I don't know. I just think the funniest thing about French is that you can troll people by saying I love you, but then you can flip it into I like you. Je t'aime bien. Yeah. Like, you can't do that in English. It's the most hilarious thing. But Ben, to bring it back to basketball, your point, it is a bit impressive that two Montreal guys, especially with the adversity that they had to face, are now going to be potentially sharing a lineup on the court in the NBA together on the Toronto Raptors. They're the local team for the most part. But I think that it also has the potential to unlock a little bit more from Chris Boucher, who exploded on the scene with 38 and 19 last game.
Yep.
Again, him playing at that natural 4.
Exactly.
It's a lot more promising, Ben.
Yeah, and we saw what he could do. He's had his best lineups, best moments this season being on the court with Aaron Baines, who has struggled, who has been a liability most of the times he's on the court. But I think that's, as you mentioned, just him playing his natural spot. His ability to come on the weak side, get rebounds, get blocks, all those things I've mentioned on a few times on the podcast. So with a more athletic, more modern day center, even though Khem Birch can't shoot threes and Aaron Baines can, but having another presence there to help Boucher out, I think that might have a chance to really unlock him. And Nick Nurse is the head coach of Team Canada basketball, so that's another positive thing. Maybe he's looking at his national team front court right there with Tristan Thompson struggles, and I guess Olynyk and the guys are still in that lineup. But
Olynyk has been mad since he's got traded to the Houston Rockets.
Yeah, what is Michael Grange saying? He was saying he was going to get bought out. Maybe he'd come to the Raptors. That'd be a guy I'd be really excited to see. What about that tandem? Maybe next season, a tandem of Boucher, Birch, and Kelly Olynyk in the front court. Would you be happy with that, or would you want a bigger name in the front court next season?
Oh, bigger name for sure. And there's options. We'll break it down when we get closer to the offseason. I want to sign off. couldn't even tell you what he looked like. If he walked by me, if he sat down across from me at the table that I'm podcasting on, I would not even recognize that man. So
I watched a YouTube video on the draft today. Would consider myself an expert.
there you go. Ben, I want to sign off with this question to you.
Mm-hmm.
Is Khem Birch, he's been there for 4 seasons, right? Comes from a inferior college league in the Mountain West Division. Actually, maybe that's not true. I just know Baylor obviously won the most recent NCAA tournament. I assume that they're harder in a harder division than the Mountain West, but I'm speaking out of my butt. That could be completely wrong. But again, he's a 5-5 guy, 20 minutes per game. He's been in the NBA. He's been in the G League. He's been everywhere. This is what it's translated to. We kind of know what we're getting a little bit. Freddie Gillespie, 10-10 in the G League, but has never had that NBA experience. Yep, double the stats. Maybe in a harder division in college. I actually have no idea. Only on a 10-day contract. Might not even get played. Remember, we picked up the Dante. What's his name? Dante Hall.
Who's actually going to the Magic right now.
Well, there you go. The question is, the final question: who are you more excited to see? Who do you think is going to be more impact player?
I'm more excited to see Khem Birch just because I've seen him play well. You and I, we watched the highlights, we watched this, we watched that on Freddie Gillespie, but we really don't know much about him. We can only go off highlight reels, and you can make a highlight reel to make anyone look super nice. So I've seen Khem Birch be good. It's been a guy that Raptors people have been talking about for a while now, potentially bringing in specifically this season when we didn't have any centers. But I'm excited to see him. But if you had to give me... If you were to ask who has more potential or who I think has a more potential to just really burst out onto the scene, especially being 6 years younger at 23 years old, more of an unknown, a guy that's overcome all the odds, not making his JV team in high school, playing D3 basketball, then barely making his squad in university or college. I think Freddie Gillespie might have that more potential upside. They're the same height, they seem to have similar styles, but I'm really excited to see both of them on the court, and who knows? Who knows? Maybe both of them will be the twin towers down low, blocking shots, getting dunks, all those things. But Ryker, we'll sign it off there. You guys are the best for making it this far. I was about to say, Ryker, you're the best for making it this far, but all the listeners, y'all.
I don't always make it this far, so thank you for acknowledging that, Ben. I appreciate it.
Yeah, but everyone listening, y'all are the best for making it this far too. Check out the Twitter and the Instagram, all that cool stuff. RaptorsDigest.ca, the TikToks. All of it's popping, so check all that out. Ryker, do you have any last words?
We forgot to plug everything, Ben. We forgot to plug merch. We forgot to plug like section. We forgot to plug subscribe. We fell down on the job, so hopefully people just intuitively knew to like the video.
I just play the animation, so tell your friends, folks.
Sweet. Cheers.